BBC Home Service. Here is the 8 o'clock news. Sir John Ingram, speaking of the economic crisis at Worcester last night, warned the people of Britain to face further cuts in the near future. He stressed the importance of a rigid economy and appealed to everyone to accept the present austerity with fortitude and optimism.
This financial crisis is very serious. These are tough times for the world and tough times for Britain. And at such times, what this country needs is a leader with a track record in international economics. It doesn't matter what track or what record. This is no time for novices, because this crisis is bad news for all the people of this country. Except me. Jeez, I needed this. I was going down faster than a ferret in a bobsled. At last, something where putting my serious face on and looking miserable is what people want to see. Get on.
So the party's over. It was Warren Buffett, the 78-year-old multi-billionaire investor, who said, "When the tide goes out, you learn who's swimming naked." Even now, the beaches of Monaco, Jersey, Grand Cayman and the Hamptons are awash with butt-naked bankers scrabbling for the shore. No surprise, then, that last month the Governor of the Bank of England, Mervyn King, signalled the start of the long walk back to boredom. A twist on Mandela's long walk to freedom.
Oh, I spent 30 years in jail before they let me run anything. These guys should do it the other way around.
Around the world, the recriminations have begun. Hello. Tonight, our news night, I'm joined by some of the finest brains in the city, and we thought it would be good to quiz them on exactly what's gone wrong. Then we thought, sod it, let's put them in a sack and drown them instead. In America, the bankers have been made to face congressional committees.
Your company is now bankrupt, our economy is in a state of crisis, but you get to keep $480 million. Is this fair?
Over here, the closest we get is a few people who couldn't run away fast enough being questioned by Jeremy Paxman. Yes. Are you now, or have you ever been, a banker? In the States, CEOs are being summoned before hearings like the anti-communist tribunals of the 1950s, which is ironic because this time it's not communism, but capitalism that's the threat.
Well, you see, I don't think you should ever forget what capitalism did for the Soviet Union. Damn near finished them off. Did for them what the American invasion did for Iraq. It'll take them years to recover.
In the West, the free market has taken the biggest blow to its credibility for 80 years. Robert. Hugh, in London and on Wall Street, governments relaxed controls and gave the banks free license. The result was what Alan Greenspan called irrational exuberance. We might as well have given them Class A drugs, which would have had the same effect and provided a welcome boost to Colombia's economy. It was a time of weak regulation. In 1999, Britain's Financial Services Authority announced, "We're committed to maintaining a light regulatory touch for business. Professionals do not need or want the protections provided for private customers. They're in the best position to determine the terms on which they should do business with each other." That's the FSA. The one thing this has all proved is that an economy without regulation is like Prince Philip without a press officer. You just know, sooner or later, if he's left unattended, he'll disgrace himself and embarrass the nation. The result was the crunch.
Only the crumbliest, flakiest, half-baked ingredients go into new jumbo-sized crunch. Thick, nutty loans and mouth-watering bonuses make this crunch bigger than ever before. Crunch, a free trade product, now with government bailouts.
We can always call it a bush. Yeah. Thanks for the legacy, guys. Then in 50 years' time, we could talk about the bush in the same way we talk about the Depression. I lost my house in the bush. I got hit by the bush and I'm living on the street. We must never allow another bush to happen. Whereas in Britain, we can just talk about being in the brown stuff.
A Mendelssohn, a toxic instrument that has inflated its own value. An Osborne, a position that rapidly loses credit. A piston, a share that has complete dominance over a certain market.
Look, you should never forget that markets are the freest expression of Western democracies. You know, they're the best mechanism ever devised to put resources to their most efficient and productive use, free from government interference. Well, until they malfunction and bring the world to its knees, at which point it's the role of government to say, never mind, have £500 million.
I think this crisis has shown that people were wrong to say that governments are at the mercy of the markets, that somehow we don't have a role. I think it's clear now we do have a role, and that role is to bail out the banks when they make a catastrophic error. As Alistair Darling said, only governments can do this because they can refresh the parts others cannot reach. Or was that Heineken? Anyway, we do the same. And it's reassuringly expensive. No, hang on, that was Stella. Anyway, it's all about liquidity.
So the governments bail out the bankers, but then they always do. Gordon Brown's idea of recapitalising the banks didn't exactly come from the Communist Manifesto.
This isn't really the time to be taking stock. This is the time to be buying stock in the banks, so they have the confidence to do whatever it is they were doing, but not make quite so much money out of it.
Let's face it, you have to hand it to the banks. Well, we are handing it to the banks. But in return, what do we get?
Are you hooked on bailouts? Desperate for that next fix of government cash? Addicted to irresponsible finance? Are you a banker? Don't worry, it's okay. It happens to thousands of ordinary people all around the world. There's no shame in admitting it. All right, there might be some shame in admitting it, but it's not like you've killed anyone, directly. So why not contact us and talk to other people just like you who also fell into the world of banking and struggled to get out? You owe that much to your loved ones, and your customers, and the taxpayer. Contact Bankers Anonymous, and we will guarantee to keep the size of your payout a secret.
You know what's strange about the last couple of months? It's how we've seen Americans come together and unite over one thing. They all hate the bankers. You know, when you get the anti-capitalists with their slogans and their placards and their scruffy clothes agreeing with the super-capitalists who'd rather die than bail out the bankers, you kind of feel, well, this is a nation at one.
Well, I mean, it's extraordinary. You've got the people who can't stand capitalism and the people who can't stand socialism, and they're both on exactly the same page. It's like seeing Swampy and John Redwood up a tree together.
But for the moment, at least, the banks are on the back foot. In the 90s, they were in such a position of power that banker David Rockefeller told fellow delegates at the Bilderberg conference that the supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national self-determination practiced in past centuries. Nowadays, you're less likely to find the words intellectual elite and world bankers in the same sentence.
Although you might find them on the same yacht. Very, very important. Very important we don't alienate the real wealth creators. Yes, we need ordinary, honest men of the soil. Nothing wrong with that. Ordinary people doing what ordinary people do. Making things, soft cushions, lettuces, I don't know. What do people do in factories all day? Anyway, ride around on bicycles in cloth caps, calling each other chummy, waiting for the tea trolley to come around. Nothing wrong with that. The great unwashed beavering away, home to a tin bath in front of the fire and a plate of hot ciabatta and dripping. Perfectly reasonable, perfectly fair, perfectly ghastly. But don't let me influence you. No. What we need, every bit as much, only more so, are very, very rich people holding shadowy meetings on Mediterranean yachts, oiling the wheels of the world economy. Little drip here, tiny drop there. You scratch my back, I'll tip off the editor of a national newspaper. Always has been and always will be, and it's my job. Hang on, I have still got one, haven't I? Yes, it's my job, the one Gordon specifically asked me to do, to get stuck in and make sure the papers have a good, old-fashioned story about rich folk on the razzle. To send the message that things are back to normal, to how they've always been, how they always will be. Plus ça change, plus say you'll always love me. Right, everyone back to work. Taxi to Corfu.
Nowadays, you're much more likely to find the kind of analysis offered last year by the delightfully named Ambrose Evans Pritchard. The strategic failure of a whole generation of economists, bankers and policymakers has been so enormous that it may now take a strong draught of socialism to save the Western democracies.
Look at us now. Buses, empty roads, trains, packed like sardines without the olive oil. Just look at us.
What's the point of a fortnight's starvation and boredom in some broken-down resort when you've got to come back to this? I ask. No point in anything that I see.
Watch it, gloomy. Everybody's gloomy these days. Why should I be out of fashion?
You know, I think we're going to get through it. I think it's going to be all okay because I just really think it's newspapers and television, isn't it? Just, you know, they love all the doom-mongering, stoking it up.
I don't agree. I think that's far too optimistic.
Really?
Yes, because I think that we are on the cusp of a catastrophic disaster.
No, I'll tell you why I think that can't be true. Let's look at somewhere like Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Okay? But, you know, there couldn't be a greater disaster than there.
Yes.
Could there? And yet they still stutter along, don't they?
More than stutter.
Motoring along.
Inflation, they've got 14 million%. I can't imagine that.
No, I understand what that means, right? You know, if I say, for example, I want to go and buy a pair of shoes in the morning.
Yeah.
And then I meet my chum for lunch and we have a glass of wine or whatever. I then go and pick them up in the afternoon and they're 14 million times more than they were in the morning. I mean, I think I have to admit that I would absolutely have second thoughts about buying.
I suppose, you know, the point I really want to make is that when you see Robert Mugabe on television and inevitably, you know, he's banging on about let's, you know, kill somebody horribly, murder them who's in opposition and so on and so forth, he is always impeccable. Isn't he? I mean, and particularly the shirts. Oh, you know,
handkerchiefs,
freshly laundered, crisp as you like. Now, my point is this: that shirt will have to have gone to the laundry and been paid for.
You're absolutely right.
He's got Swiss bank accounts. He's got proper money in there.
All right. You know, let's look at the power sharing conferences that they've got, right? And there are all these Zimbabwean chaps putting out, you know, the glasses and the water and whatever, and they are all in beautifully pressed, beautifully laundered shirts.
Yes.
Don't tell me they've all got Swiss bank accounts.
I agree with you, Mary. And not only that, but it's also the opposition people as well. I mean, it's, you know, what's his name? Morgan Chanangalang. Well, I mean, he's getting beaten up all the time, right? And quite badly, actually, they say sometimes. So he'll be full of blood. But I'm sorry, every time you go to a new meeting on television, he looks immaculate. So their dry cleaning bills must be through the roof.
That's right.
But it's always impeccably turned out.
Yeah, and they always are back the next day for the next meeting. So it shows that somehow aspects of the economy are still working.
Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine.
I mean, the problem is here. What's going to happen to us? I mean, the four of us could end up with no money. No money. Now, just think about
that. It's unthinkable.
No
money. Matthew, I thought that you'd put all of our money into an Irish bank where it's supposed to be guaranteed.
But don't you have to be Irish to do that?
Darling, I have explained this to you. You don't have to be Irish.
You don't?
No, well, look, all of the Irish birth records burnt during the Civil War, so all you have to do is say
yes, pretend you're Irish.
The only thing you need is an Irish grandmother.
And you can get those on the internet.
Very simple.
An Irish accent, do you?
Not at all, not at all. No.
I mean, to my mind, an Irish bank and security is just a contradiction in terms. I mean, the government can guarantee deposits until they're blue in the face, but it doesn't mean that the Consolidated Bog Trotters Savings Union is going to be any safer than the bookie on the corner.
Sweetheart, I have asked you not to call it that in front of people, all right? And incidentally, the bookie on the corner is Irish as well.
I thought it was all guaranteed.
No. I mean, if you're the big financial brain, what are you doing with your money?
Well, I'm putting my money offshore.
But I mean, this is a globalised world. There is no offshore. Everything is linked together. That's the trouble.
Well, you know what I've been pondering, and quite heavily actually. I think that we should put all our savings in Mars.
I'm not giving your mother any more of my money.
No, Mars.
Well, the planet.
In the sky. Yes, you just give all your money to Richard Branson. He puts it in one of his rockets, right? Yeah. And then you just whisk it off up to Mars. And even if it doesn't get to Mars, it's much safer in the orbit, just circling around.
The North Koreans could shoot it down. North Koreans, have these anti-satellite missiles.
Don't start me about the bloody North Koreans. They make me furious beyond words. They just want to ruin everything for everybody.
Killjoys.
Bloody North Koreans.
Killjoys.
And here is Financial Report at 5:30 p.m. GMT. The markets reacted cautiously to an announcement by the Federal Reserve that they were going to have a look down the sofa to try and find some loose change. The euro was up briefly on the news, but then went back to bed, closed the curtains and refused to speak to anyone, while the Nikkei had a cold and wasn't picking up its messages. Elsewhere, the Nasdaq received the last rites and wasn't expected to make it past the weekend. And in London, the FTSE Top 100, now the FTSE Top 1, rallied briefly, came to the window, showed its bottom, then spent the rest of the day going round in a false beard and a wig.
The crisis has undoubtedly affected many people's lives. Well, look, you know, we've all suffered. My party treasurer, he's lost half his money, down to his last £600 million. Rupert Murdoch's lost a quarter of his fortune. Roman Abramovich has lost $20 billion. But it's not all good news. Already, the changes are evident in British culture.
And in a change to advertised programmes, location, location, location has been reformatted as repossession, repossession, repossession. Cash in the Attic's been moved to Iceland and renamed Crash in the Arctic. Property Ladder has been replaced by the Homeless Persons Unit, and Homes Under the Hammer is now subprime under a $900 billion government bailout plan.
Football will have to rein in a little, with sponsors falling by the wayside. Manchester United today announced a new sponsorship deal with Steve Connolly, a 50-year-old greengrocer who wants to sell his bike. There are some good things. It's very unlikely we could afford to go to war again. Yeah, oh well. Yeah, life was just so simple then, wasn't it? Yeah. Every day was like Christmas. Well, not for the Iraqis, of course. For them, it was more like Christmas the year the tree caught fire and the house burned down. But look, come on. If we hadn't actually had all that money, we couldn't have done all that stuff, and then where would we be? Well, not in Iraq, for a start. Anyway, look, not my problem. I don't do after sales. But the most important question now is, who's to blame?
If I may, I'd like to quote that famous luminary and economic theorist, Shaggy. It wasn't me sitting there in cabinet. It wasn't me in the Treasury. It wasn't me butt naked at the World Economic Forum. It wasn't me introducing the PFI.
When I was elected in 1992, my campaign slogan was, "It's the economy, stupid." What I should have said was, "The economy, it's stupid."
Last month, Alan Greenspan, the man responsible for policy leading up to the crisis, conceded that I've found a flaw.
You found a flaw in the reality.
A flaw in the model that I perceived is the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works, so to speak.
Which is more than bank shares did. They just kept falling. It's a little like Neville Chamberlain turning up at Croydon Airport in 1945 and saying,
"I'm terribly sorry. I hadn't read the small print. When I said peace in our time, I of course meant war."
We all went along with it to an extent.
Oh yes, the unions were happy to sanction payment holidays from company pensions. Tabloids and magazines celebrated the excess.
We allowed ourselves to believe it would last forever. Property prices up every year, cheap shopping trips to New York, easy credit, low taxes, and there wouldn't be any consequences. Now, it's like the morning after.
What did I do last night? I did something. What did I do? Oh, oh, Christ, no. Oh, Jesus, no. What did I do? Oh, God. And then you turn on the news and it's all true. Banks collapsing, the bailouts, the housing slump, Peter Mandelson back. And you think, what did they put in that drink?
Even the politicians are struggling to come to terms with it all.
No, hang on. Here's another. Next week, I do a Bobby Ewing, come out of the shower, at which point it's revealed that the last 18 months was a dream and never happened. It's brilliant.
So who is to blame?
Well, look, we supported the government through this crisis, because let's face it, we didn't have any ideas of our own. And it was partly our freeing up the city that got us into this mess in the first place. But now we thought, oh, golly, we need to start scoring some points out of this, so better start blaming Gordon again. And it takes us back to our roots. You know, we've always blamed Labour.
That's a That's completely wrong.
Really, I mean, David Cameron has no idea.
He does have an idea. He likes marriage. He approves of that. Now, that could be a vote catcher.
No, but that's the problem, Mary. He likes marriage so much. He's always slobbering all over his hideous wife. It's repulsive. What's her name? Tabitha or something?
Samantha.
Well, I mean, that is the problem, you know. You think they're going to rip each other's clothes off, and any minute they're going to kind of get down with the Congress of the Duck or something.
Please, no, please,
with the children. I mean, Samantha, Jesus Christ.
No, all I'm saying is that not having an ideas can be a huge benefit.
Did you know that you can buy a pencil case in her shop, this Tabitha Samantha creature, that costs £7,000?
Yes,
Did you read that?
A pencil case,
Does it have pencils in it?
No.
I'm sorry, honestly, I'm trying to make a very important point.
Yeah, sorry, come on.
Oh, hurry it up, sweetie, we're all dying.
No. The great advantage of David Cameron not having any ideas is that if he did, they'd be more than likely completely the wrong ones, and then he'd have to get some more.
But surely, I mean, he should at least give us some sense of how you deal with, you know, the credit crunch.
No, that would be absolutely fatal. Yeah. Because then it will be clear to everyone that he hasn't got the faintest idea how to deal with it.
You see, here's the thing. He does have an idea because he agreed with Gordon Brown, whatever it was, 3 weeks ago. Because 3 weeks ago, Gordon Brown saved the world, didn't he?
No. Gordon Brown's a complete and utter prat. Everybody's agreed about that.
No. That was 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago now. And then, you know, something happened. I think it was a Tuesday. And Gordon Brown became the wisest leader in Europe.
No, the wisest leader in the world.
Was it the world? It was the world.
I don't think it was a Tuesday.
No, I agree. It was a Tuesday because it's my Pilates class and I would have remembered.
No, it was a Wednesday.
No, because he was a complete prat again come Wednesday.
That's right.
But he was the wisest leader in the world for nearly a week.
Yes, well, you see, and that was when David Cameron agreed with him because, I mean, let's face it, if somebody is the wisest leader in the world and you don't agree with them, then you're just going to look like stupid.
It must have been a Monday because by Thursday Cameron was saying it's all Gordon Brown's fault, the whole thing, and everybody agreed with that.
The point there was that when we were staring into the abyss, we all had to pull together. But as soon as the abyss eased off a bit, then he could go back to attacking Gordon Brown.
Politicians are all saying this, and the implication is that party politics is completely irrelevant if the situation is serious. The only time we can have party politics is when it doesn't matter. It doesn't say much for our political system.
No, but I mean, the point surely is that it would be disastrous if David Cameron had an idea, especially about the financial situation. What he's got to do is to behave as though somehow, I mean, don't ask me how, at some unspecified time in the future, he might possibly have an idea.
It's the obvious tactic, isn't it, for the Conservatives? They keep completely quiet and let Labour throttle themselves. But the odd thing was that, if you remember, in 1997, Tony Blair, he was saying, this Conservative government is completely discredited, and by the way, we're going to keep its policies for the first 2 years. And now Cameron is saying exactly the same thing about Labour.
Yes. That's what I don't understand. Why don't they just stick with that? Why don't they just stick with the policies for the 4 years?
Well, the whole 4 years.
Yeah, for the whole 4 years.
No, well, at least there'd be a bit of a virtue and some consistency.
That's right. And, you know, all that would happen would be the usual. You know, that whoever becomes Prime Minister, I mean, at first they're insanely popular. And then somewhere along the line, they become a complete arsehole. And then they just swap over.
And just swap over.
You know,
the same policies.
Absolutely. And then you wouldn't have the arguments about the same policies because it would be all the same.
Exactly.
So who do you turn to for advice in this situation? George Soros? Warren Buffett? Even now there's a tribe in Papua New Guinea who worship Vince Cable. But what about the IMF? Here's what their chief economist Simon Johnson said at the G7 meeting last spring. Obviously, there are some particular concerns about whether hedge funds are taking extremely large leveraged bets, But we don't see anything in this current situation that would merit a heavy-handed, big increase in regulation of any kind. And here's what his boss said this September. It's because there were no regulations or controls, or not enough regulations or controls, that this situation was born.
You know, what gets me is the ingratitude. I spent 10 years doing what they wanted, tickling their tummy, dancing to their tune, going to their dinners, laughing at their jokes, flattering them, and when they make a catastrophic arse of it, they blame me for letting them do it.
Well, that's the kind of role we play. You vote us in, and then you blame us for everything. You don't think of blaming yourself for electing us. Just imagine what would happen if we did everything right. How bad would that make you feel about yourselves?
It was like a financial Titanic. If the captain had ordered everyone onto the lifeboats before he'd even hit the iceberg, they'd have thought he was bonkers. It was only by ramming into the iceberg that he was able to reveal just how big the problems were.
I was not to blame. You have to remember that. See, I presided over the greatest period of economic growth this country has ever seen. Don't forget, when I came in, we had a $128 million surplus. Next year, we're looking at a $490 billion deficit. Yeah, that's some legacy.
You know, governments can only do so much. And a lot of good things happened unto me. Well, let's just say I didn't get many complaints. But the trouble is, you get the banks to do something, and they'll find a way to make money out of it. A lot of money. So what started out as a good idea bites you in the butt. I know folks say that when I pushed for loans to be extended, I was opening a can of worms. But let me tell you, I knew exactly what I was doing. I was coming to the end of my term. I couldn't serve again, so I had to make sure I'd laid the foundations for the next few years. So I repealed the Glass-Steagall Act and take the firewall down between the gamblers on Wall Street and the savers on Main Street and let the markets do the rest. 8 years later, George Bush is sitting on the biggest economic crisis since the Depression. And along comes Hillary to take over. That's where it went wrong.
The extraordinary thing was we actually believed that things were under control.
I was actually an even better actor than Tony Blair, although you didn't realise it. And that's real acting, you know, when you can't even tell that it is acting. That's the quality stuff. You know, I was like De Niro to Tony's Harold Bishop from Neighbours. Every day I'd sit there knowing what was happening and yet somehow managed to keep a straight face. That took real skill. Yeah, I wanted to laugh. You know, believe me, there were days when I could hardly stop myself. But I knew it was essential I came across as frugal and penny-pinching and dour. And Scottish. That's not a criticism. Oh, apparently it is. Even though in reality I was being anything but frugal. The pennies I was pinching were from you, through stealth taxes, and I'm not as dour as people think. I've been having smiling lessons. Look, I can nearly do it convincingly.
And just about the only thing he's got going for him are the Tories.
And so to the city, I say this. Your behaviour is unacceptable. The era of fat cat pay and big city bonuses has to end. How are Barbara and the kids?
For years, public and politicians alike have allowed themselves to be hypnotised by the markets. We know it's a trick. Why do we fall for it?
Well, you've only got to watch the news every night to see the city's got its own advert in the middle of the news. They tell you what's happened to the share prices. You know, here's the FTSE, that's what the Dow's up to. All that just goes to show we're all meant to be enthralled to this industry. Oh, but really, it's just the biggest special interest group there is.
Well, I personally don't have a problem with the workers controlling the means of production, as long as they all work for a bank.
Politicians maintain that jobs depend on the city, especially theirs.
We salute the men who served their country first, and then went on to serve the banks. Nigel Lawson, Chancellor, Non-Executive Director of NM Rothschild. John Major, Chancellor and Prime Minister, Chairman, Carlyle Group Europe, and Advisor to Credit Suisse. Tony Blair, Prime Minister, now Senior Advisor to JP Morgan. Jonathan Powell, Chief of Staff to Tony Blair, now Managing Director, Morgan Stanley Investment Division. They shall not grow poor, as we who are left grow poor. At the going down of the banks and in recession, we will remember them.
In future, the people running the banks will have to be more cautious.
How much? And his income is what? Oh, okay, but I'll need a full structural survey before I can sign off on it.
As Britain continues to run up debt, nationalise the banks and regulate the markets, communist philosophers must be chuckling in their graves. Meanwhile, China's heading the other way and the Russians are doing the splits.
Did you see Robert Peston on the TV last night? Boy, those city guys are screwed! They were right all along! Sell your shares and let's start a revolution!
So where do the bankers go from here? Well, now the party's over in London and on Wall Street, bankers and investment managers have decided to pack up and find another party.
Well, in the last couple of years, you'd hear people saying, you know, life's not what it was here. We're going to get hit by terrorists or bird flu or MRSA, or even worse, by having to pay the same tax as our cleaners. So the writing's on the wall. It's Shanghai, Mumbai, Dubai, or bye-bye.
After kicking Russia for 6 in the 1990s, the West are now being invited to try their hand in China. Oh, yes, indeed. Having dumped Russia into the championship, very much so, in fact, can the West push China into the relegation zone? Now, the tactics are really interesting here, with the capitalists swapping over to the left wing, the socialists changing over to the right, leaving us all in the hole behind. Now, I don't know about you, Graham Taylor, but I'm starting to have a nagging suspicion that both systems are fundamentally flawed. It's starting to look like the Cold War might actually have been a 0-0 draw. Since 2001, the authorities have allowed Western firms to take small equity stakes in Chinese banks in order to introduce them to superior know-how and risk management practices. Yeah, and if that doesn't stop them, nothing will.
Are you a communist or a capitalist? To find out, simply answer these questions. Do you want fewer and fewer options as a consumer, as small independent businesses and genuine free enterprise are marginalised or crushed? Do you want the public to be at the mercy of a small cartel of unaccountable despots? Do you want to be continually assaulted by relentless propaganda? Do you want your economic system to be doomed to end in failure? If you've answered yes to most or all of these questions, then yes, you are a communist or a capitalist. Congratulations. Welcome to the Democratic Republic of Britain, home of the successful 30th Olympiad and glorious Festival of Sport. And with no less than 76 gold medals and a clean sweep in women's weightlifting, it's certainly been an Olympics to remember. But it's not just in the sporting arena that Britain continues to do well. Under Chairman Balls, all of Britain is enjoying the benefits of socialist living, including subsidised cabbages for young and old, and a free flag to wave on Yvette Cooper's birthday.
Well, who'd have thought it, eh? Me, a commie. As they say, better read than Princess Michael. Mind you, a bit of a turn-up. Mum dies, muggins thrown in the deep end. Next day, the whole thing goes Fergie-shaped. And I'm told to flee or face the consequences. Well, I thought, I'm not going anywhere. Not with the winter cabbages just coming through and the orchard needing pruning. So instead, I took my chances. Threw myself on the mercy of the authorities. First mistake. Massive show trial in front of the glorious People's Commissariat under President Ed Balls. Do you plead guilty, they asked. But I haven't done anything. That's the point, they said. Guilty as charged. 50 years hard labour in Gulag Tetbury. Actually, didn't turn out so bad. Bit back-breaking, picking beetroots all day, but at least I feel I'm doing something with my hands. Not keen on the old thought correction unit, though. They kept showing me pictures of Mum and Dad in full regalia, with a voice shouting out, "This is a disgrace!" My voice, actually. Seems the Pinkos and I rather agree on that one. Then they ordered me to appear on television, denouncing decadence. Can I put in a bit about modern architecture, too? I said. Nothing doing. They're more concerned about the HRH monogram I'd stitched onto my workers' dungarees. They threatened to take me down the isolation block.
As if I hadn't been living in one of those for the last 50 years. And there's always Camilla, still working down the tractor factory. Chin up, she said. What chin? How we laughed. As long as we still got each other. And the Arboretum. Oh, and the Aston. And my premium luxury organic food and drink brand. And several hundred acres of prime agricultural land. We'll survive.
It's the end this time, all right.
Obviously, David Cameron. Exactly. Because he's got the look. No, he's got it just right. He's always in a nice suit, a lovely shirt, the hair. He's got the whole thing going.
It's perfect, isn't it? And he looked great on that beach.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, he just, like, that was such a coup de théâtre when he did those shorts.
He nailed it.
He nailed the zeitgeist.
Yes, he absolutely nailed it. Whereas Clegg, nowhere.
Oh, no,
nowhere.
Absolutely hopeless colour-wise. Absolutely hopeless.
Very, very superficial judgment. All we need to find a political leader who can show some dynamism, you know, who can give us some sense of hope in the future, who can break the mould.
Do you think Brown can do that?
I think Brown, well, not only can do it, but I think he did do it at the Labour Party conference, the very moment, and this was a crucial moment in British politics, that Sarah Brown came on stage and introduced him.
Really? And he kissed her.
Yes, he kissed her. And that was the moment that everything changed after that. Everything changed politically.
But the problem is, you know, where is this political guidance? I mean, who are these people who are supposed to be telling us how we get along in this country? I mean, it's not Gordon Brown, is it?
Yes, I think it is. Because he's already done it. He, at the Labour Party conference, he came up with something which was, if anybody had noticed it, would have been really inspiring, which would have actually laid down political discourse for the next 20 years. In 6 words.
What? I didn't hear them.
6 words.
What were they?
All right, they were, insulate your loft for half price. That is the 21st century equivalent of man is born free but is everywhere in chains. It's big,
but, you know,
big.
You could be right. This could be something concrete at last. I mean, you know, if the whole nation was laying polystyrene in their attics, I mean, it could just rally people.
I suppose it could be like, you know, it was in the war, in the bomb shelters and everything.
Yeah, but the trouble is that you won't be with all the others in the bomb shelter. You'll be alone in the rafters, and you won't be singing "Roll Out the Barrel."
No, darling, look, I'm going to say it, and I mean this. If it's for the good of society, then I, for one, am prepared to have my loft insulated.
Yes, I suppose. I mean, you know, an Armani shirt versus lagging your pipes.
Yes, that's the political
We
divide.
already have insulated the loft, my darling.
No, then just rip it out and have it all done again. Because it's free.
Well, no, that's not actually free for people like us. We have to pay half price. Well, there are certain groups for whom it's free.
Who's free?
People on low incomes, people on housing
Oh,
benefits.
not shake hands.
Well, they've got to be helped. Why?
Why?
Why do they have to be helped?
No.
Why do these people... I mean, we know who we're talking about. I don't have to...
Say it.
We know
Say it out loud,
The
sweetheart.
working class.
Yes.
The working class.
The bloody working class. Just for calling a spade a spade. And while we're at it, it's the bloody working class who started this meltdown of our finances in the first place.
Absolutely.
That's an exaggeration.
No, it's true. What you say is absolutely true, because they wanted all these things that they couldn't afford. You see, and they have no thrift about them. So what do? They borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow on more and more and more and more credit cards till it's absolutely catastrophic. And you know why they do this, don't you? Because they are incredibly greedy. And they are even more incredibly thick.
Yes, please. Oh, please. You know, because, I mean, look at all of these buy-to-let deals that they did. And they took on these huge mortgages that they couldn't possibly repay. And Not only that, these people aren't fit to be landlords. They haven't got the breeding.
They're not like the Duke of Westminster or you know, that very clever landlord who got 12,000 a month off Ealing Council for those Afghans.
Well, that's true.
Thrifty.
Yes, but you see, when the chickens come home to roost, these people, they expect the government to bail them out.
That's right.
Don't they?
They do. That's right.
I think what would be very good for them, they should all spend a couple of years queuing in a soup kitchen and eating their own babies.
Yes, you're absolutely right. A little bit of discipline, because then, you know, then there would be no more binge drinking.
No.
There'd be no more stabbing. And they'd look up to people like us. Don't you think that shows a little bit of respect?
That's all we want. I am sick and tired, for one, of being elbowed off the pavement in Oxford Street. Sick and tired. I've had enough of it.
Intolerable.
You might be blaming the wrong people. What about the bankers? What about the people, the city boys who lent them the money in the first place?
But that's exactly the same point that I'm making.
That's right.
Because these lower class oiks have moved into the banking game, haven't they? I mean, in the last 10 years, if you go into a dealing room in the city, it's like going into a scene from Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. Now, in the past, when I had an appointment in the city, I know that I was going to meet someone very much like myself.
Yes.
And we'd sit and have a glass of Fino sherry and an arrowroot biscuit, and we'd converse about, you know, how the shooting was the last weekend, and it was civilised.
Civilised, that's exactly
now,
it, yes.
I'd be expected to have a view about whether Rooney or Giggs should play in the hole with Berbatov.
That's disgusting. It breaks his heart.
It does.
Breaks his heart.
And you know, I have to say this, I know it doesn't sound very good, but I believe it's going to take an awful long time to turn this around.
Yes, I hear you, darling. I agree.
So.
And can I just say that in the meantime, we will have to sit there looking into this huge big black hole.
Black hole.
And, you know, while our life as we know it changes utterly.
Yes, I know.
Utterly.
I know.
Well, look, I mean, what are we all going to do?
Well, you know,
It's the end.
You know, I used to go down to the old people's drop-in centre on Saturdays and do a bit of charity work. Well, I haven't done that for
years.
Well, 2 years
Yes,
anyway.
years.
2 years, but I did actually go down on Thursday, and I must say, I found it a very uplifting experience. I found I was genuinely heartened by it.
Truly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what was it that moved you? I mean, was it, I don't know, the courage of the elderly, or, I don't know, their sense of humour?
No, it was the fact that looking around, I could see they were all completely in the shit. And I thought, well, at least there are people worse off than me.
So now we have this weird situation of the government running the banks. Cashier number 4, please. But what would happen if the banks ran the government? The United Nations Security Council met today in plenary session with all the new members, among them the Cayman Islands, Jersey and Monaco. So where does that leave us? We don't trust the free market, we don't trust the politicians, we don't trust entertainers, we don't trust footballers, we don't trust football managers, and then we say, why can't we trust anyone anymore?
OK, final attempt. From January to March 2010, anyone whose surname begins with the letters A to F can move house, but only to a property 5% greater or lower in value, and then only if the property they want to buy has at least 5 valuations.
When it comes to money in particular, trust has gone completely.
Hello, sit down. Any chance you could lend us a few bob? We're not proud. We'll take anything. Cash, watches, jewellery. Tell you what, stand up and empty your pockets. Let's see what you've got. That's the way. Is there some loose change I see there?
There used to be something about seeing the bank manager that made us feel uncomfortable. Not anymore. Unless next time you go into a bank, the bloke behind the counter puts on a balaclava, points a gun at us and says, "This is a stick-up. Take out a 1-year fixed-rate cash ISA, or the kid gets it."
Well, you know, it's very easy to say what should have happened, which is why I'm not going to bother. What I'd like to say is just this. Every night, when you go to bed and close your eyes and pray to God there's still an economy left in the morning and your shares and bank deposits have been wiped out completely, all you have to do is say to yourself, this is all Gordon Brown's fault, several times while banging your head against a wall. And eventually, and this is the best bit, without me saying or doing anything, you'll find yourself thinking, you know what, next time I'll vote for old Dave and his lot. Can't be any worse. And who knows, maybe the headaches will go away for a bit.
So is there a solution?
I stand outside the International Monetary Fund with my trouser pockets hanging out and wait for people to throw money at me.
Well, let me tell you, the richest 400 Americans own $1.3 trillion. Twice what our government has just put up to bail out the markets. Just 400 people. Now, supposing they all got together, pooled their money and saved the world, how good would that make them feel? Better than any fine meal or fancy car? Better than a Nobel Prize or Olympic gold? Better than sex? Almost. They could die with the biggest, broadest, happiest smile on their faces. And isn't that all any of us want? To make our peace? At the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC, 300 Spartans saved Western civilization from the invading Persians. Now, 400 Americans could save Western civilization from itself. That's the kind of leverage I like.
Even now, bankers are using a new system of credit indices to insure themselves against the catastrophic failure of the world's financial system.
Oh, come on. How likely is that?
And in any case, who would pay it out? It's beginning to look like the whole thing is just an excuse to find more and more elaborate instruments to use in a global casino. It's just a huge game at our expense.
So, you finally got there. No, let me think. This is a good one. No, really. There used to be these places called factories where people made things which they sold and made money, which they put in the bank so other people could borrow, so they could build factories and make even more things. Well, I know it sounds crazy, but, you know, why not?
Good night.
Ha ha ha!